Hello, YouTube. We're going to talk about nonprofits today. Today, we're going to talk about nonprofits, what they espouse to do, and the board members. Uh, Jill, who commented on some of the other videos about what the owner of Fire Mecca did, actually reached out to me. And they are part of this nonprofit, and they say that one of the things their vision of the nonprofit, which we'll talk about, is to be a community leadership. It says they are a community leadership program. And just a reminder, it looks like this person also votes. So keep that in mind. So Jill is one of the board members of this nonprofit and reached out to me and seemed like they wanted to have a conversation. And although we can go over the details in a nutshell, um, I told them after they reached out to me, I told them I'd like to have a conversation and told them that they've been lied to, and that you know we should have a conversation about it. Now, you would think a normal leader would hear concerns that another board member of theirs has lied to them, and at the very minimum, uh, like investigate that to any degree at all, and find out what happened. Um, but no, it looks like this registered voter, board member of Burners Without Borders Arizona, who is part of a community leadership program after a member of their community is concerned that someone's spreading lies, they just blocked me. Rather than having an adult, mature conversation. I mean, this type of behavior, like, imagine if this person had kids, like, and what they might be teaching their kids to do as far as being a leader. So, as of right now, this leader who gets a very serious concern brought up from a community member, their response is just to block them. Um, and as you already know, um, when you have abusive people in your community, like, they need to be named and shown what they did. And the reason that abusive people can continue to exist in communities is when people do not bring it up, and they continue to exist when people just shove it under the rug, and wait until they go abuse again. And one of the reasons why that happens is because there's no leadership. And this board member is apparently they are part of a community leadership program. They're literally on the board. And when a concern is brought up, they just block the person. That's leadership. And yeah, let's say this person like was a mentor to young people or even had kids. I mean, were they just going to teach them? Yeah, when someone brings up a concern, especially like a serious one, that someone in their organization is acting abusive, they're just going to block them. Good job. That's leadership. um, so there's a lot more going on with this. Um, and yeah, just a reminder, this person's part of a community leadership nonprofit, and they vote, and this is the behavior that you get from them. Um, I've explained to them that they've been lied to, and the lack of any seriousness, maturity. Um, th- Maybe they will unblock and continue the conversation. Obviously, that would be the best thing they can do. And whoever sent them the video that is asking for some accountability from this organization, um, you should have sent them the ethics video. I made two ethics videos, and I'll link them in the description. And they basically explain how to do the right thing. Uh, I usually it's like children, small children, or sometimes angsty teenagers that you need to teach to do the right thing. Um, Typically, when you're dealing with adult humans, um, you assume they know how to do the right thing. Like it's only supposed to be like 1% of people that are malevolent narcissists or something. But birds of a feather flock together. Um, and there is lots of togetherness in this organization. So maybe it's like birds of a feather flock together. I guess we will find out. So let's see what else are the considerations here, and a lot more to come. So let's see what this has to say. Hello, YouTube. Today we have an educational video, and this may or may not have anything to do with any of the other videos you've ever seen. And just a reminder, last time I checked, the defamatory post in Are We Dating the Same Guy was still up. The one that the owner of Fire Mecca wrote, last time I checked, it was still up. For some reason, not sure why that would be, and still haven't received or seen any sort of admission or public apology for all of the defamatory statements, threats, doxing that the owner of Fire Mecca did. Not sure why, but as I said a long time ago, an apology would go a really, really long way. So, without further ado, this is an educational video, and like I said, may or may not apply to anyone watching this, may or may not have to do with anything at all. But let's get into it. So, there's some interesting legal information, and I'm just going to read some of this stuff that I happen to stumble across. So, this says, what are the legal considerations for conducting non-profit background checks? And I found out that for-profit companies have some legal considerations when conducting background checks. But in addition, nonprofits also fall under almost all of the same rules. And in addition, the rules not only apply to employees of nonprofits, but also the volunteers that they wish to run background checks on. Amazing. So we're going to read through a couple of this information and maybe explore some of the legality of if you are maybe interested, as that's that. So this says, background checks are, I'm going to paraphrase some of this and just get to some of the interesting stuff. Background checks are essential. However, nonprofits must comply with state and federal laws that regulate the use of background checks. Here are some legal considerations that nonprofits should be aware of when conducting these. So there's I guess it's a government group called the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which also controls, interestingly enough, um, for profit and nonprofit companies, even if they do a legal background check, what information from that they are allowed to publish to third parties or disseminate to the public. And as you can guess, it's zero. So if you go to get hired somewhere and you have to go through a background check, it is not legal for the company to then publish any of the results of that background check. That is very illegal. Um, and especially like the CEO, if the CEO or one of the board members were to do that, that's very illegal. So the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the FCRA, is a federal law that regulates the collection, dissemination, and use of consumer information, including credit reports and criminal history. Nonprofits that use a third-party provider to connect. So typically, yeah, you typically you're using some paid service to get this background information. Um, must comply with the FCRA's requirement. This includes obtaining written consent from the individual, including volunteers, um, and providing this thing called pre-adverse action notice, which we'll look at what that is as well. If you're not doing that, it's also part of the requirement from the FCRA, that law. Um, and in addition, if there is adverse action, so say you do not get the employment or the volunteer position because of something on the report, that there must be notice to the person who was denied. One of the things I read says that the report actually has to also be provided to the person who was denied, so they can actually see like that you didn't just make it up or whatever. Um, Interesting. And this says nonprofits must comply with state and local laws that regulate the use of background checks. These can vary by jurisdiction. This is a federal law, though, so that's going to cover all states. For example, some states prohibit employers from asking about individuals on a job application, blah, blah, blah. So that's a state level thing, but this is Texas, but you know, look up the laws in your state, I guess. This says it is not uncommon for nonprofits to do background checks. I think this is, yeah, this person says, I did not receive any consent paperwork. And this was about a volunteer. Anyways, nonprofits must provide notice and obtain consent. Texas law requires blah, blah, blah. This also applies to volunteers. The consent should be in the form of a separate document that is clear and conspicuous. Done without consent, this is an invasion of privacy by the nonprofit. So typically, what this means is the nonprofit itself would be sued if it was done under the guise of the nonprofit. Here's another one. Consent for background checks. In most cases, this is also about nonprofits. Pre-employment or pre-volunteer background checks require the consent of the candidate. This is about um, the law, and the logic in requiring approval for background check prior to extending an offer is the fact that it digs deep in the background of the candidate to get a sense of who they really are. According to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, for short, background checks qualify as consumer reports, meaning the applicant's permission is necessary to do the background check. Um, so there you go. We also found some other interesting information. We'll come back to that one. Here's another one from one of these background check companies. Might want to become familiar with FCRA and the FTC. I guess it's the FTC. It's FCRA under the FTC. Um, When nonprofits complete background checks, they must comply with all the regulations and laws that apply. Make sure your organization complies with the relevant rules to avoid potential penalties, fines, litigation, and time losses. This FCRA has numerous regulations that govern this stuff. And this is specifically for non-profits. Again, it's going to say employment, but this also is for volunteers. This law protect privacy, fairness, accuracy, standards, how to gather and use the information. We're going to look at one about how how the information should be handled. Here we go. The FTC has also created guidance about how the FCRA applies to volunteers. The agency indicated that nonprofits should treat volunteers like employees in the application of the FCRA. Securing background checks for the purposes of employment is liberally construed to include the use of background checks, blah, blah, blah. Also for prospective volunteers. Blah, 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 and then it's like an ad for using theirs. But maybe you should, because they say we can help you remain in compliance throughout the hiring process. State laws, blah, blah, blah. Civil Rights Act, stuff like that. Fair Credit Reporting Act. So this is actually going to the act, which, if you're not very smart, you might not be able to read this. So sometimes those like overviews like this, where smart people have kind of boiled it down for you, but you can, go right to it if you want. This is an overview, and then we can look at the actual thing. Companies that provide information have specifically legal obligations. Protects information collected. Information cannot be. So this is a little bit. This short blurb is a little bit more about. Here we go. Employment. The use of this information. The group, like the nonprofit, must notify the consumer or prospective employee, volunteer, when an adverse action is taken on the basis of these reports. Which is also good, because imagine a nonprofit did a background check on you without your knowledge. That might not be good. We can go to This is to jump to different parts of the FCRA, and this is the FCRA document itself. Here's things about consent. Um, there's even a thing. Um, there was. Anyways, this gets more into like the legal jargon of it, which is why those summaries by the lawyers are good, but you could be considered a victim of fraud. Um, if something like one of these regulations is not followed by the for profit or non-profit. Um, but you can read this for yourself. I find the summaries pretty good. Um, Here's a little bit more. Can background checks be shared? No, employer can share an employee's background check information unless it has written consent from that employee. Employees have numerous rights that are protected under the FCRA. There's that law again. Employers are not allowed to share personal background check details. Interesting information. So it's actually possible to. So this FCRA law is kind of underneath the. How do we get back to ftc.gov? Oh, look at this. When you report fraud, it's shared with more than 2,800 law enforcers. We use reports to investigate and bring cases against fraud, scams, and this says bad business practice. Sorry, I can't. Oh, I can move this over. Bad business practices. So if you were a victim of some group, like some group that wasn't following the FTC laws, this button right here, it says report now. Protect your community by reporting fraud, scams, and bad business practices. Interesting. And we use reports with law enforcement partners to help with investigations. So I guess it kicks off an investigation. Interesting. And then, yeah. Oh, look at that. It's like the whole U.S. Um, oh, look, or you can see if looks like maybe you can see what's going on. Hey guys, just back here to cut in again and make another comment. Yeah, just keep in mind the 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 leadership situation here. Um, this nonprofit, they say they're a community leadership program. Like, what is the program? It's not like listed. Like, is this all just like a fake thing to go after people? Like, is that what this nonprofit is? Um, they say they're a community leadership program, and like I just want to point out that we have a board member behaving very very badly with all the evidence, lying to other board members, and then we have this abusive board member that then lies to other board members. When a when the victim comes to the other board member, Jill, when when the victim comes to another board member, this leadership program. I mean, I'm guessing if they're running a leadership program, they see themselves as some kind of leader. You have an abusive person in the organization victimizing someone. When the victim comes forward to another leader, the leader blocks them. Imagine this is this nonprofit. Imagine if you had a son or daughter who was abused by a leader of this nonprofit. And then they went to another leader in the nonprofit, and the other leader heard what they said and then literally blocked them after they were abused. Would you want your son or daughter to have stumbled into like interacting with this organization if that's the leadership that they're doing? I mean, how can they teach other people leadership? How can they run a community leadership program when this is literally the leadership that they are performing? Imagine if your son or daughter, saw, that they're doing blood drives and they're doing these toy drives and doing this community cleanup, and they show up to an event for a bunch of times, and not only do they run an illegal background check on your son or daughter, but then one of the board members abuses your son or daughter. They don't know what to do. They tell another board member, and the other board member shuts them down. Basically saying, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about the abuse. I'm not even going to look into it. That is the behavior of Jill right now. And I would like to see the part of their leadership program that tells them to ignore victims and not look into any of it. What kind of leadership is that? That's called dangerous leadership, because this is like I said from the very beginning that I was believing that Jill was probably like duped, like lied to. That's what I said. That's even what I said to Jill. Jill, I believe that you've been lied to. Like, it's time to wake up. Now, after Jill reaching out to try to have a conversation and then just blocking me after me saying I would really like to have a conversation about what has happened, about the lies that have been spread about me, that you've been lied to. Let's talk about it. That this is their response. This is their behavior. This is the leadership. This is how this organization apparently is run. Um, Maybe the type of people that just want to sweep things under the rug. Once again, like I said before, um, whoever sent Jill that video, um, after you send them this one, send those ethics videos, because like that's what organizations like this need if they're going to survive. Um, you cannot run an organization um, in an abhorrent, unethical way, and think that that's not going to be good. The ironic thing is that my personal experience is that people like this, when people that they don't like, for example, politicians, or a better example would be like other nonprofits or other companies, like when they find out, oh, the CEO of such and such company, like, did some bad thing, right? Some whistleblower comes out and they get exposed because they were embezzling money, or they were ignoring victims, or they were doing some cover up. Think of dozens of large companies that, you know, they've discovered something happened, or even like, there's examples in Hollywood, there's examples in politics. Somebody's past is brought up, and it really does harm to their brand or something. And there was a whole thing a couple years ago where um, there was a I don't know what I should say because I know a lot about this. Well, there was a large, let's call it a electronics brand, and then it came out there was some kind of, it was like a Me Too sort of thing, you could say, when the public honestly did never, it was never really publicly released, like the details, um, but there was like vague statements essentially. The CEO was abruptly stepped down, resigned or whatever, but they did make a statement that was essentially like a vague, like there were allegations and he's resigning starting immediately. And do you know why? The reason for that is because those allegations, um, and I believe that at that point they were like proven to be true. It was like a Me Too sort of thing. If that person had not resigned immediately, then the rest of the brand, there's a brand a lot of people know, um, then that brand would have suffered massive reputational damage because the damage had been done. And so the only way to have any sort of sense of saving face was for the perpetrator, right, the abusive person, to immediately resign, assuming that the company, the brand, wanted to keep going. And that was that. And people don't remember it. It's a really big brand. Everybody knows it. Um, Maybe I'll like dig up the story as a lesson or something. Um, on the flip side, if the CEO had not immediately resigned, and the brand released a statement, a public statement, hey, here's what happened and this person's fired or whatever. If instead they would have tried to shut up the person who was the victim of the abuse, um, eventually it would have just come out, and then you would have had not only the abuse, but then the brand itself involved in the cover up. And then it's like, well, not only do you have a brand that had the CEO abuse someone, then you also have the brand where the CEO um, abused someone, other coworkers or friends of the CEO were okay with the abuse, and that they helped cover up the abuse. And so at that point, you have not only complete brand destruction, but when people, those other associates, know about it and they're okay with it, then it the way the public acts is the people who help cover up abuse, they might as well have just done the abuse themselves, because they're basically saying, I'm okay with this type of behavior. And at that point, you have a brand that you can't trust, that you can't purchase their products, you can't go to their events, um, and like I just think there's so much hypocrisy because I guarantee you, um, I am very, very sure that if you pointed out to people like Jill, hey, didn't you hear about that one brand that there was like a Me Too thing and, the CEO was exposed for their bad behavior, their abusive behavior? Don't you think that's a good thing to expose bad behavior? And they'd be like, yeah, good. That's good. And I'm glad that person came forward to expose the behavior. But when they are confronted with, maybe they wouldn't, maybe like based on Jill's behavior, maybe if you said, hey, Jill, I have this example here where there's an ethics violation at this company or this nonprofit, and someone within the company high up was proven to be abusive, and then someone came forward to expose it. Don't you think that's good? Who knows? Maybe Jill would be like, no, I think that person should have never came forward. I think an investigation never should have happened, and I think that abusive person should, in the right kind of world, they should have been able to just not have to face any consequences, accountability, or whatever. I mean, I would be shocked if that was Jill's viewpoint on abuse, but based on their behavior, now that it is in their lap to confront with a member of their own organization, um, abuse going on inside, I don't worry. As I've shown over and over and over and over on this channel, I have receipts of everything. Um, Maybe they will unblock me, and maybe the next video will be something like Jill comes forward and realizes where they went wrong. Um, Maybe the next video will be Jill confessing that they didn't know what the right thing to do was, and they watched those ethics videos and they got some advice on how to do the right thing, because they don't know what the right thing is, and um, they looked and they realized that there actually isn't any community leadership program, that they just do blood drives and they do cleanups, but the program doesn't actually exist, and we need to fix that. And Jill says, yeah, the right thing to do is to investigate abuse and not try to sweep it under the rug. Um, we'll see if that's what Jill ends up doing. I guess we'll see if that comes out in the next video. Your own state here. Reportfraud.ftc.gov. Um, well, good informational video. Sure hope nobody I know has to use a website like this. Seems like, I was thinking a little bit about like people who do the right thing, and I was thinking about like there's people who like do the right thing, and then there's people who like they have a very hard time like getting themselves to do the right thing, and it made me think like who like what people don't do the right thing. And I thought like, well, it's usually like toddlers, like children, and children, you children sometimes they do the right thing, but sometimes, they have to be taught to do the right thing. Sometimes they'll like take candy when nobody's looking and think nobody's going to find out. Um, or, yeah, just think, oh, they'll get away with it. Nobody will find out. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess that applies to like toddlers. And like sometimes teenagers, like as they get a little bit like more agency, they might do some things. They'll like maybe cheat on a test, or, um, and maybe, they get away with that. Then they think, oh, maybe I can keep cheating on tests or something. Um, But you hope that most people have most well by the time people are adults, generally when they're presented with an opportunity to do the right thing that shouldn't be that like hard for your intuition to be like, okay, I know what the right thing to do here is. I know what the right thing. Like most of us learn like really early on that like lying is bad. That's like a simple one, right? Like you teach children not to lie. Uh, Lying bad, like, and you know, when adults sit there and waver and they're like, gosh, I don't know. Like, there's the ones that legitimately don't know what the right thing to do is, which is pretty concerning. And, like, maybe those people are just dumb, but they should, like, ask someone who's smart. And then you ask them, like, what do you think the right thing to do is in this situation? Um, at least get another opinion or something from someone you respect who's intelligent. Or there's the people who are faced with like a moral choice and they know what the right thing to do is, and it's like they're they're sitting on the fence and they're sitting there and thinking, man, I know what the right thing to do is, but I just don't feel compelled to do the right thing. I feel compelled to do the wrong thing. And it seems like it's just like the kid who, you know, cheats on their test thinking like they won't get caught or something. Um, but I did see this website and I didn't read the whole thing. It wasn't until right now that I read this part about how they share reports with law enforcement partners to help with investigations. Like, I didn't even read that the first time that I saw this website. Um, so that's that. That's just the informational video today, and looking forward to if you have kids, teach them to do the right thing. And if you're a human being, uh, consider doing, the right thing. Take care.